Hi guys and welcome to today's class. In this class, we're going to improve the definition in our photos. I'm going to choose these three as examples so you can see what you can do with these adjustments. Okay, let's open them in Camera Raw and, well, why do we need to improve the definition of our photos? Well, because most cameras, not all of them, have a filter that help to avoid the moire effect. The moire effect is an effect that happens when we take a photo of a pattern with a texture or a net that coincides with the net that the sensor has. So we get some unwanted curves and brightness. To stop that, the sensor manufacturers have applied in front of the sensor this filter that in some way lightly defocuses the image. It kind of blurs the image. Okay, now that's been said, whenever we take the photo with RAW, as we don't adjust the camera at all, because in RAW we work with the raw information, that photo, if we compare it with the same image in JPG or JPEG, will have lost some definition. This is why most of the programs that I use to develop RAW files have incorporated in one of the panels a filter that, well, in this case, Camera Raw calls it sharpening. Simply, all this does is simply give the photos some definition back that it would have if it didn't have that filter in front. In summary, it gives the photo what it should have back. So it's just a question of giving it what it would have in relation to the quality of the lens. We're not going to make the photo have more quality. We're just going to use this panel to improve the definition that it already has. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we augment the micro contrasts, or the edge contrast, of some pixels with others, and in that way we manage to give the photo a higher definition. In the end, what we could do with the software, as the hardware is already in the camera, and this is the image that comes from it, all digital cameras, when they process JPEG files, apply to them a small or a large quantity of focus. We can control that variable in the menu of many digital cameras, and in some we can't. In a RAW file, as it doesn't have any of that, we could control it here, in the detail panel, once we've developed the photo. Well, I would always do it having first gone through the basic panel and the curve panel, making sure the photo is as we want it to be. In this case, we want a little bit more shadows, we want a different color temperature, we want a little more vibrance. Okay, let's imagine that this is the development that I want for this photo. I can maybe take away some spots that it has here, and we could leave this photo clean. And now, once we've got the photo, how we like it, let's give it here a little contrast curve. Let's go to the detail panel. And in the detail panel, we're going to improve this a little bit. And in the detail panel, what we're going to do is, firstly, we're going to zoom in on the image to at least 100%. And I say at least because the more we zoom in, the better we're going to understand how the variables of this panel work. As in the past, we put all these values at 0. Well, here we have in the detail panel, and in the part that corresponds with sharpening, well, everything's at 0. And we have 4 variables: amount, radius, detail, and masking. We'll see them one by one, and we'll see what each of these things do. In the amount, what we're going to do is increase the amount of micro contrast that the image is going to have from now on. And this is going to make it so that the edges are more defined. Here in this case, if we augment to 300%, we can see it much clearer. And we can see how the edges of these leaves are worse contrasted, and now they're better with the edges of the sky. In summary, what we can do if we take it to 1600%, what we're doing is augmenting the contrast at the edges that each pixel has with its surroundings. If we look here, we can see that the amount of micro contrast is at 0. It was the image as it comes out of the camera, and as we raise it, we'll see how the pixels that are dark are going to become darker, and the clearer ones are going to become clearer. Let's put the value at 100 to start. We go from 0 to 150. We'll put in an intermediate value, in this case maybe 108. This second regulator is the radius. In the radius, we're going to go from 0.5, that's the minimum, to 3. What does this do? Well, it increases the contrast radius of each pixel that are at that number around it. So, if we give it like a radius of 1, each pixel is going to contrast with, in order with the 108, the amount, with the pixels that are around it, at a distance of 1 pixel. The more we increase the radius distance, the more the contrast is going to increase. Okay, as we can see here. But if we go too far, what we're doing is undoing certain contrasts, and we're only seeing the edges. For example, I'm going to put it down here, and this pixel that's around here, that's in this tone, that's not very clear nor very dark, is going to blur with the rest when I increase the radius too much. Okay, as we can see here. So we've made the edges better of the areas we want to improve, but we've also integrated some pixels that have different tones with the others. Later we have detail. It's one of the regulators that's the worst achieved. It's not very well made in the whole program. Really, what it does is mark the absolute edge of each pixel in a way that we're going to recover that edge of each pixel that we lost when we increased the radius, the limit of each pixel, and we're going to see square by square. What this does is, well, it makes an image more defined, but it also gives grain to the entire image. If we put this at 100%, we can see how the sky is grained now. So in some way, we've made the edges of the image in general better, but at the cost of the quality. Now it looks as if the photo has noise issues. So the detail regulator is always going to be at a very low level. I recommend not putting it above 5 to not ruin the photo. Even then, having it at 5, we're going to have areas in the image that have a contrast that's defined, like the one in the leaves edges, where we have like a darker area and a lighter area and some intermediate areas. But there's some areas in the photo that don't have that contrast because they all have more or less the same light, where we shouldn't be able to see those pixels contrasting one with the other. In the sky, for example, it's quite obvious. I want to have the sky as it was in the beginning. Here I can see how the sky was in the beginning. And the sky was much, much softer. Where we've improved the definition in the leaves. Let's see the before and the after. And now we can see that they're a little bit more marked, but the sky has been ruined. And here is where the last regulator, the masking, joins the game. What the masking does is leave the photo as it was in those areas that didn't have a previous contrast, so as they were. So if I increase the masking, I'm going to be leaving those areas that didn't have a contrast as they were in the beginning, keeping the adjustment I've put in here for the rest of the photo. So we can now see the before and the after, and we can see how the sky stays as it was, but we can see an improvement in the clarity in this part here in the leaves. So with this adjustment, what we've done, if we put this image at 100%, we can see the adjustment both in the leaves as in the edges of the streetlight. Let's see the before and the after. It's quite subtle, but we can see that we've improved the edges and the clarity in the post, and the leaves, and that the sky is still as it was. Well, this would be a basic adjustment for a low ISO image, and it would be a typical adjustment. We could always do more in the amount or less even in the radius and play a little with it so the contrast we make isn't that exaggerated. The detail is going to stay at 5, and the masking, depending on what we want to hide, what we want to stay as it was, and what we want to improve in our photo. Let's see how we can improve in other photos and what problem we might find when using this adjustment. Let's see this one. Well, let's start developing it, because here we have a problem with the light. We have all the light spread in the midtones, and we don't have anything left in the shadows or in the whites. Let's give it a little more strength in the dark areas of the photo. Let's improve the contrast. We'll raise the whites a little bit. The illuminations, we're going to raise that contrast even more. We'll put it here. Okay, here. Very good. We're going to adjust the white balance to how we want it. A little in the clarity. The clarity is also a very similar adjustment to the sharpness. But clarity just has one regulator. So it doesn't cover all these little details that we can cover with the sharpening panel. Clarity, well, it goes through light and shadow areas and raises the contrast in those little areas where there are lights and shadows, and gives us an image that's a little bit more defined. So it's always good to combine both clarity and sharpening to improve the definition of a photo. So to improve the sharpening, we have to put the photo at least 100%. Let's raise the amount. If the ISO is low, the amount can go above 100. If the ISO is high or very high, we may not even have to do this because we would end up just creating noise problems. We'll see this later in another photo. In this case, I'm going to raise to 110, and the radius is going to go to a value of 1.8. Here we can see the before and the after, and we can see how the edges and the definition of the photo has improved. Let's raise the detail a little. Let's see before and after. The improvement is visible. It looks as if we have a better lens, and to avoid making pixels in the areas that have little contrast, the soft areas, we're going to raise the mask. As in this case, there isn't really a part of the photo that, so like a smooth area, so we can see if we're doing the right thing with the mask. We're going to see a little trick to improve the definition of the photo from the beginning. So let's go back. Let's put everything at 0. And if we want to see really what we're doing, we're going to put the photo at 200%. And we're going to start pressing the Alt key and going to Amount. Here we can see it's taking away the color information so that we can focus more on the edge, on the improvement we've done on the edge that the amount is going to make. We can see how the black on the edge is more marked than any part of the photo. The higher we raise the amount, here it looks a little grayer, and here it looks a little more marked. The black is more marked, and the white. Let's put it at 110 more or less and let go. Hitting Alt as well, let's move the radius, and as we move the radius we can see here how we're contrasting as well more the edge of a lot of pixels. Let's put a radius of 2. This is so we can get an idea of where we want to take it. So now the detail. In the same way, we're going to see how the detail taken to a certain point, well, what it does is make an extreme pixelation, and, well, it actually kind of ruins the photo. So, as I've already said, we're going to leave it at a maximum of 5. And here is the most interesting part. The masking, and to see the masking, we're going to go back to put the photo fit into view. I'm going to hit Alt, and as I go to masking, the image is going to go straight into white. That means that right now, all of these adjustments of amount, radius, and detail are being applied to all of the photo. If the mask is white, it means that the adjustment of these are being applied to all of the photo in the same way. But if I raise the mask, we're going to see how there's some parts of the photo, some areas, some black spots in our photo that tell us that in our photo that we're not going to be applying those adjustments to these areas. So we'll be leaving the softer areas of the image outside of that sharpening, so that the zones that are already smooth or don't have much contrast aren't ruined, and so that they only improve on the areas that have contrast and have edges. Let's see now with this adjustment at 200%, the before and the after. We've improved the edge without creating noise or creating pixels that weren't there in the beginning. And now we have the improved photo with good definition, close to one that was taken from the camera or from a camera that didn't have that filter that lightly blurs the image clarity. As we have the photo developed and with the sharpening adjustment done, let's go here to the snapshot panel and let's save a developed one developed and sharpened one. Now, here is the part where this guy talks a lot about the title he's using, and the problem is he's using a Spanish version because he's Spanish, and I just need to translate this. So he's going to be talking about the use of the word in English and the use of the word in Spanish. Really not something I can get into when doing this course, so I'm just not going to try. My name is Jared Swift, and I've been translating this guy. So enjoy. Okay, let's go back to the snapshot panel, and we're going to see what the original looks like. And here, as you can see, we can see a change in a photo like this that had very little contrast and very little definition. We can see the original and the developed and sharpened one. And the change is, well, it's quite visible. Let's go now to one of the photos that we developed and adjusted in the lesson where we were talking about panoramas. We created a snapshot called developed where we had the photo cropped, adjusted with light and color. So now we're going to go to the sharpening panel, and in this panel we're going to put the photo at 100%, maybe even a little more, and let's go to an area where we can see contrast in lights or colors. Maybe here in this area. It's very interesting because we can see here two problems. We can see there's chromatic aberrations and halos in these contrasted edges, and obvious noise because of the processing we gave the photo. The more we want to illuminate the shadows, the more noise we're going to see. So that noise is going to have to be corrected before we start to define the photo. As it's an image that's done at 400 ISO, the noise is more obvious than it would be at a 100 ISO. Let's start on this detail panel because the photo has been developed to reduce the color noise. That is the most cumbersome in a photo, as we saw before. As we raise the color noise and it disappears, we can take away some luminance noise. Okay, what we're going to do now, before we give it a little bit of an improvement in the definition, we're going to get rid of these halos and chromatic aberrations in the lens correction panel. There we have a box that takes away chromatic aberrations, but we can see that this is more halo that we're going to have to go to the manual panel, and well, as it's a reddish halo, we're going to move this to the red, and we're going to tell it that we want it to get rid of this halo. Okay, we can see how it's practically disappeared. Perfect. So here we can see the before and the after, and okay, we've gotten rid of quite a lot of halo that we don't want to mix up with the color. Very good. Perfect. Let's go back to the sharpening panel, the detail panel. Here, as we've seen in the photo before, we're going to press the Alt key to see the amount that we want to improve. I don't recommend going over 100 within 400 ISO because it's just going to create more noise problems, and we're going to raise the radius, and here I'm going to restrain a little bit, leaving it 1.5, and then in detail I'm hardly going to touch it. And then let's go to the masking. Here in the masking, let's put it in view. Here I'm going to be able to see how I leave the areas that are dark in the photo. I'm going to come through from value at 0. With Alt pressed, I have the entire photo focused on, and now I'm going to start raising it. And the areas that stay in black are going to be the areas that are outside of that focus. Well, I want the definition of the edges of those elements that have contrast to improve, and that is what's going to give me a more defined image. And let's go now to 100%. Let's go to the part where we were, so around here, and we can see the before and the after. We can see how we're making the definition of the photo a bit better, as we haven't raised the values too much so as not ruin it. We've gotten rid of the noise problem that we had, and we've improved the definition a little bit. We can see it here in these bars here. No more noise problems. We still have a little bit of color noise here. I'm going to raise the color noise reduction a little more so that it disappears. Alright, so there we have the image at 100%, and yeah, it's disappeared. And we have a photo that's, well, it's pretty much better in definition and in noise. We can compare it here with the photo we had originally. Well, as we've raised the shadows, we have a little more illumination. We have less noise, we don't have any chromatic aberrations, and here we can have more definition than we do originally here. We don't have any halos, and, well, the noise is gone. Okay, so now we have the image corrected. Let's go to make a snapshot. And this snapshot is going to be called Developed and Sharpened. And now we'll click OK, and we can see. Now let's put the image as it was originally, and now we can see the image developed with noise, with halos and aberrations, and now we can see it with sharpening, a better definition, no noise, and a little bit more improvement in the light and the shadows, most of all, that we did in the basic panel. Okay, so it's always recommendable as a last step before we save the image, and most of all in those photos that have like a lot of areas that are contrasted with good definition that we made with a low ISO, to go to the detail panel, and there we can improve the definition just a little bit. Most of all with cameras that have a filter on them. What that does is ruin the photo a little bit in its definition. Okay, so with this, we've seen everything we can create or achieve with the details panel. Both getting rid of noise that we did back in the day, or this improvement in definition as we've seen in this lesson. There are other adjustments to improve the definition, but as we've already seen, they are here in the exit panel, and they correspond to the output sharpening. Here we can sharpen it for 3 options: screen, glossy paper, or matte paper. And we can assign a low, standard, or high amount. These output sharpening controls are going to be similar to the ones we've used here in the detail panel. But the difference is that we don't have any control on the end result. So we would have to try out for each photo and determine whether a setting for glossy paper, for example, would look better with a low, standard, or high amount. For these adjustments, it's always better to go to programs like Photoshop that gives us more of a multitude of options to improve for print a photo, or so we can see it on a screen, on the edges, and the general definition of an image. So here in Camera Raw, it's ideal to give photos the look it should originally have. It's a focus to make the image on a screen or in a print better. But if we want to make this better, we'll have to go to programs like Photoshop. Okay, so this has been the definition improvement class, and I'll see you guys in the next class. See you later. Bye.